Hello and welcome to Philosophy Slam, the podcast. Hello, Mark, Vernon.
Hi there, Robert Rowland Smith, my collaborator on this adventure into words.
Yes, thank you, my co-slammer, Mark. So, Mark, here we are in our amazing podcast, which is the recorded podcast version of our live amazing shows, where we take two words at random and attempt to say something devastatingly insightful, wise, evocative, thoughtful, and poetic about those two words, and usually fail. However, we occasionally say something that we know tangentially is related to what we do know about. Now, today, funnily enough, before we came on, while we were just chit-chatting, we were talking about numbers, numerology, and systems. And we go on the random word generator, and lo and behold, one of the two words that comes up is the word number. So something spooky going on there, maybe.
I've heard that people think the algorithm is some kind of divinization technique, and I'm half a step closer to wondering whether there might be something in it.
Yeah, well, exactly. So number is one of our words. And the other word, sofa. S-O-F-A, sofa, what used to be called in English a settee, or at least when I was growing up, it was called a settee. I don't think it's called that anymore. Number and sofa. So, Mark, I'm going to count down from three, and then you're going to say something brilliant about one or both of those words. 3, 2, 1.
Well, inspired by your recitation of those numbers, I shall start off with numbers, because one of the things that fascinates me about numbers is whether they are heard or even experienced quantitatively or qualitatively. And I think this is something which has changed. And I first picked this up because I've written and teach, actually, Dante's Divine Comedy. And in the comedy, which was written in the 14th century, there's fairly regular reference to numbers. And I've learned that if you try and hear those numbers with a 21st century frame, as in 3 means 3 things, or 10 means a distance of 10 miles, say, you distance yourself from the text. Whereas if you remember that words at that period, numbers in that period, carried a sense of quality as much as anything else, it starts to open it up. So 3 in Dante's Divine Comedy is always going to carry a sense of perfection or completion or a wider perspective or something that's generative. And the idea is that 3 in the Christian dispensation is always an echo of the Trinity. And the Trinity is the way of trying to describe the divine, the ground of being, but that it's not just a static unity, a monad, but is generative, is creative, is a kind of outpouring into all manifest things. And so when you hear 3, you also hear a resonance of creativity and outpouring and all those things. I know it reminds me too of in Plato, there's a moment where Plato describes one day Socrates sitting and seeing rain falling around him, and in a moment sees 2 raindrops coalescing to form 1 raindrop. And this makes him wonder where the two-ness went. You know, he doesn't, as it were, ask a mathematical question about volumes. He thinks, gosh, I just saw before my very eyes two-ness disappear into oneness. And that's very remarkable, because two-ness, the idea that things are divided or a duality or a binary, is so very, very different from a unity. And it sets off a series of reflections. Interesting, in relation to the Divine Comedy, Galileo, the great early modern scientist, he realized, I think, that number was being used in a different way, in this quantitative way. And he actually gave lectures on the Divine Comedy in an attempt to show that the new quantitative experience of number wasn't going to undermine literature like the Divine Comedy. But he did this in a slightly cack-handed way, I think he took all the numbers in the Divine Comedy and worked out that, I don't know, like the floor and the ceiling of hell had to be certain thicknesses in order not to collapse in on themselves. So that rather accentuated the point than rescued the old way of understanding things. But anyway, number 321, Trinity, binary, unity. Did you hear that when Robert counted down just now? Robert, did you think that when you counted down just now?
That's why I counted down, Mark, of course. But I want to come back to the idea of two-ness and oneness, not least because I was encroaching on your territory yesterday, writing this new book I'm working on the field, where I attempted to give a quick gloss of Neoplatonism and the idea of the one. So I'll come back to that, but let me introduce sofa quickly. So
I forgot about
sofa,
that.
interestingly, is yes, you got carried away. Sofa, interestingly, is often connoted or associated with number because you have to choose when you go to buy a sofa how many seats you want, 2-seater or 3-seater, typically. Because whatever a sofa is, it's more than one seat, right? So the sofa is a plus one at the very least. It's, in that sense, already a convivial space because a one-seater sofa doesn't exist, right? There's no one sofa. It's only a double. Because a one-seater sofa is what we call an armchair, basically, or at least a chair. So sofas and numbers have significant connections already, particularly.
I'm sure people have thought that many times before as well.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Do you want a 2-seater, 3-seater, or even a 4-seater? I mean, I used to have a house in Camberwell, Peckham, actually, Mark, where you may remember coming, where I had a corner sofa, which had sort of three seats around a right angle, basically, so 6 seats in total. So that was quite a prestigious affair. But my point about that was the corner angle of the sofa was lined up exactly against the TV in the living room. And I think there must be an almost symbiotic relationship in modern life between the sofa and the television. And in two respects, one that we sit on a sofa typically to watch TV. So there's something about entertainment and sofas and leisure time, which is important. And then I was thinking, well, actually, the sofa in itself has become an icon of the TV in terms of breakfast television and chat shows, where the sofa, having been exclusively an item that you would keep in your home for lounging about and being, a couch potato. Americans say couch rather than sofa, don't they? Actually became projected into the much more brightly lit space of the television as a not particularly relaxing place to sit if you're a chat show host or on breakfast TV, but nevertheless simulating a relaxing environment. So you come and sit on the sofa. I don't know if you've ever been on breakfast TV, Mark, or anything. I think I've done it once. You sit on a sofa, and of course it's very hard.
No, it's true.
Very
You have to
hard
sit upright, and yeah. Otherwise, you look like you're just slobbing, and it looks terrible.
It looks terrible, and you collapse back into it, and the sofa threatens to eat you. So there's a kind of false relaxation of the TV sofa. But either way, it seems to me the rise of the sofa, and I've got no retail sales data here to accompany this thought, but I would imagine the rise of the sofa has gone hand in hand, or bottom in bottom, with the rise of the television. If you took TVs away from most homes, you take away the need for the sofas. And I wonder how that's changing now that people watch as much TV on a mobile phone. Are they watching as much in bed, for example, as they are on sofas? So anyway, I'll come back to the notion of the one and Plotinus and the armchair philosopher. But that's just a quick thought to get us going on sofa too, to make the connection.
Well, only on the Philosophy Slam, the podcast, would you hear discussed the rise and fall of the sofa and its metaphysical symbolic presence in our homes. But I mean, I love that thought, and it makes me think too about another way that numbers involved in this, and I do remember sort of hearing about this really when I not doing telly. I don't do much telly, darling, but I do bits of radio. And on the radio, I remember one of the best bits of advice I had was that it's called a broadcast medium, as if it's one person to many, but it's really not, actually. And the intimacy of radio, and even more the intimacy of the television when you see someone as you're sitting on your sofa, is one-to-one. So you think of speaking as if you're speaking to a friend, say, when you're looking at the microphone, rather than giving a speech. And if you do give a speech when you're on the radio, and even perhaps more on the telly, then it just looks a bit odd, because when people are sat on their sofas, they don't expect to be addressed. They expect to be conversed with. And so you're absolutely right about this link between the furniture in your front room and the place of the television in modern life. I don't know, maybe the screens and that everyone's watching their own particular thing, and perhaps that even accentuates it further. And part of the sense of the individual and the individualism and the private world, and even therefore the fragmentation of collective experiences, the decline of the sofa, the decline of civilization, even. Perhaps these things are not so far apart as one might think from that comfy cushion that you otherwise collapse and try and forget about such disasters.
Exactly. And of course, the most famous sofa in the world is usually referred to as a couch, and it's in Maresfield Gardens, which is the Freud Museum. And of course, Mark, you are a psychotherapist, and you will know that the sofa/couch has a very central, really, role in the world of psychoanalysis, because it's that piece of furniture most likely to facilitate unconscious process of free association, actually, because if the body is relaxed, so the theory goes, and the body can relax on a sofa in the way it wouldn't on a hard chair facing your analyst, if the body can relax, then the mind can relax. And if the mind can relax, then its defenses come down, in theory. And if its defenses come down, you, the person on the sofa, and you, the psychoanalyst, are more likely to witness the bubbling up of unconscious material. So there's a direct link there between the relaxation of the sofa, and we talk about sofa surfing anyway, and in the idea of sleeping on the sofa, which sounds a bit overly casual, perhaps, but the casualness actually in a clinical setting is highly conducive to work, to the working of the unconscious, and for it to be allowed to do its thing and to express itself. So it's quite interesting. I mean, it's an interesting idea altogether. That yes, the sofa was mainly produced as an accompaniment to the television, but it's actually a part of the toolkit. Literally, you can probably expense it. If you're a psychoanalyst, you can probably expense your sofa, because it's like a computer to most professional workers. It's a fundamental piece of equipment. I mean, when I run constellations, the only piece of equipment I ever take is a box of tissues. That's the only thing I can really expense, because it's, people sometimes cry during constellations. So, yeah, I mean, I would say the sofa/couch in Maresfield Gardens is probably the most famous one in the world.
I have seen that very item of furniture covered in Turkish rugs. It's a very evocative. Yeah. I mean, it's become a symbol too, as you're saying, because it's so famous. And I mean, another way of putting what you're saying is that maybe the sofa that helps us relax in the evening is also the couch that suspends you somewhere between a kind of full alert consciousness and a sleeping unconsciousness. And that's another way perhaps of saying that the free association that occurs in dreams might occur in conscious life as well, but trying to find that slightly hypnagogic state in between worlds that the couch facilitates when you're watching your favorite program on the television, as well as speaking to your analyst. Who knew that speaking to your analyst was a bit like watching the television?
Well, let me come back to the idea of numbers, because you are the expert on Plato and Neoplatonism. I'm certainly not, so you can add to this. But I was thinking about the notion of the one, So Plotinus, who has kind of followed Plato, talks a lot about the notion of the one. Some people think that's a version of the divine, but either way, there's this idea that the one is this place of transcendental unity that we can somehow access, that perhaps has divine qualities, that suggests a completeness or wholeness that perhaps we've lost in subsequent life. And it maps a little bit on, I'm looking at you, Mark, here, I think it maps a little bit on to Plato's notion of the forms as a kind of ideal essence or something that precedes or exists in an eternity different from the kind of temporal world that we live in. So I was thinking about this notion of the one, which is obviously the first number. And in Plotinus, in a way, it's the only number before dispersal happens. And the reason I was thinking about this is that I was thinking about the creation of the Big Bang, actually. And again, I'm no physicist. But one of the ways in which we could describe the Big Bang, and I know it's not necessarily the most current theory now among physicists, is to describe the Big Bang going from the one to the many, from an unimaginable singularity where everything that's about to be is still, it doesn't yet exist, and it is, if you like, completely singular, into a state of dispersal. Time and space are both means of distribution and dispersal. Time distributes across time, obviously. Space distributes across space, but they both are distributions. And because they're distributions, they involve multiplicity. They involve now numbers. So one way of thinking about the Big Bang is that it's the origin of numbers too, because you're going from a one to a many. You're going from a one that is either exploded into many parts or is multiplied into many parts. But either way, multiplicity, numbers, plural, like time, is the world that human beings live in. We live in the world of numbers and time and space and distribution, not in the world of the one, of eternity, of no time, of no space. So that, yeah, I was thinking about the one. Again, Mark, I'm hesitating on this because I know you know a lot more about it than I do.
No, it makes sense, but behind Plato's ideas lie the ideas of Pythagoras, and number mysticism was a big part of Plato's borrowing from Pythagoras. And the story goes that Pythagoras was walking past a blacksmith one day, as often happened in any time before the modern world, because of the place of horses. And he realized that when the blacksmith halved the length of the bar and struck it, the note that sounded leapt up an octave. And moreover, that leap of an octave was rather beautiful. It was a pleasing sound to the ear. But then, of course, notice that that leap was associated with halving the bar. And so a link between the ratio 1 and 2 could be associated with a leap of an octave, which is an 8. But then somehow these numbers all came together to make something sound pleasing. So there's an aesthetic element. And this led, the story goes, Pythagoras down this deep exploration of how numbers tell us something about reality and link to aesthetics and beauty. And moreover, even perhaps are a world themselves. And this perhaps is a bit what Plato was gesturing towards when he talked about the ideas or the forms, that somehow is like a grammar within the world that's manifest, and that if you can tune into that grammar, it can open up what is hidden within the structure of reality as well. And so again, this is numbers that are at one level mathematics, and so are about quantities. But as a mathematician, to this very day would tell you, it's a bit like exploring a parallel universe, and there's a logic to that explanation, 1 + 1 = 2 and so on. But there's also a beautiful element to that exploration as well, and that can be as much of a guide as an equality or an equation or a proof. So yeah, these things maybe even link back to the sofa, because of course if it's not just a mechanical working out, but is a sort of quest that much relies on the imagination and intuition when you're doing mathematics, a kind of hunch or a sense that these aesthetic factors might bring to you, then who knows, maybe the therapist isn't the only person that needs a couch in their room, but the mathematician might too, in order to lie down and let this sort of slightly dream state emerge that's not just their unconscious, but maybe it's even something to do with the unconscious of the cosmos itself, revealed in these otherwise strict relationships that we call mathematics too. I'm not sure whether you're convinced by that, Robert. But anyway, but numbers and sofas, who knew it? There's quite a lot to it.
Well, what can I say? But so far, so good, Mark. Excellent philosophy slam. Thank you very much for that. We managed to crack through some numbers. I'm looking at a number on the screen now, 21 minutes. So we should probably wrap up. Thank you very much for surfing this sofa with me. So numerically. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Philosophy Slam, the podcast. You know how to be a good digital citizen. You like us, you subscribe us, you share all our work, you check out Mark's website, markvernon.com. You buy his amazing book on William Blake and indeed other books on Dante and Christianity and so on. You do the same for me, robertrowlandsmith.com. And we will see you on another sofa, virtual or otherwise, before long. Thank you very much.